Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the new album from Shypho, Proof of Concept. Alright, Shypho is an obscure Bandcamp artist from the UK, and I believe the first artist I'm properly covering on this channel that I've actually met in person. Guy mainly does pretty straightforward progressive house and ambient techno that's surprisingly professional sounding and well produced. I've been following the guy for a little while now, since I knew him through ITP stuff. He's released a bunch of EPs so far, and each one got a little better than the last. Regenerate was Anti-Meridium was better, Ultrasound was solid, Ambiguous Stimuli was promising enough to merit a quick honorable mention on my year-end list for 2018. He's also done some interesting, more experimental stuff under the name Elucidian, a bunch of one-off singles too. You get the idea. I've wanted to cover him for a while now, but none of his releases before this one were substantive enough to merit more than a couple of sentences. I did say that if he ever wanted to release a proper full-length album that I'd be on that though, and, well, here we are. He has a proper full-length debut album now. So I decided to cover it. I was pretty excited to hear how he'd work in a longer album form, so I sat down with Proof of Concept for a while. Got an advance copy so I've sat down with it for a couple days. So how does it fare? Well, it's about as good as I expected it to be. It's a solid mix of techno, trance, ambient, progressive house, no-nonsense dance floor-ready material that just so happens to have a good enough command of its atmosphere to work well on headphones as well. Nothing exactly groundbreaking or particularly out of the box, but I definitely enjoyed this thing. As with previous releases of his, there's not exactly a ton, I have to say, but there's 10 tracks, so that's enough for a video, I would say. Things start out subtle with our opener, The Concept, a super smooth ambient techno cut with super expansive but blurry ambient pads, a muted dance groove, and filtered acid synths that slowly come in later on. Super atmospheric stuff that helps set the tone for the album, and I really enjoy this beginning here. Things do take a turn for the darker on the slightly more dramatic Connection. The grooves are a lot more well-defined, and the melodies have a bit of a soundtrack-ish bend to them. The intensity is cranked up even further on the next track, Polybius, which kind of goes for a bouncier 6-on-the-floor approach with all these reverb-soaked layers of wubbing synths inspired by psytrance music. I can kind of see some influence from names like Astral Projection on the particular synth settings on display here. Pretty fun and driving track there. Spirals, meanwhile, is primarily characterized by a set of clacking percussion textures that seem to repeatedly rise up in pitch, along with some pretty hard-hitting techno grooves that maybe remind me a bit of Eric Prydz if he were significantly toned down. These first 4 tracks make for a really solid start to this album that pretty consistently pulled me in. Though I did find the track Ex Inferno to be a bit on the plain side. I think the grooves on that one end up pretty similar to his earlier track Highway, but it still fits really well into the flow of the album, so I don't ever feel the urge to skip it. I just don't think this one stands out that much. Kind of similar feelings on Dark Sided, though this one has a bit more flavor thanks to everything sounding slightly filtered to sound more distant. The bass being slightly weaker and not part of any underlying groove, I guess to make it slightly more unnerving or something. It never really stuck out to me as a major highlight, but still not a bad track at all either. Thankfully, we get 2 of my personal favorites right after that. There's the much more ambient-centric The Storm, which starts out with a lot of field recordings of rain and delicate pianos. I have wished the track had kind of stayed in that mode the whole time since it was really effective, though it later develops some more melodic trance-ish grooves as it goes on, mixing the pianos with those. Still pretty good stuff there too. But then there's Eucalyptus, pretty consistently my favorite track in the bunch. I get the feeling Shypho has always been super inspired by deadmau5, and this track certainly has a random album title kind of vibe, maybe ending up somewhere along the So There I Was lines with really bright and uplifting melodic progressions. Probably the best melodic progression that I think I've heard out of Shypho to date. Hell, there's a part of me that kind of wishes the album just, ended here, because this would have made for an excellent closer. But the album does keep going after that, and we move on to what appears to be more or less the centerpiece of the project, the nearly 12-minute Liberated. Now, I kinda wish I could mark this one as a big favorite, since it's the longest track on here by far, and you can tell Shypho probably put a lot of effort into this one to make it really big and impressive. It took me a couple of listens to warm up to it, though, mainly because the chord progression sounds like he built off the first chord from deadmau5 Brazil and went from there, and didn't really develop it much. I mean, it's not like I see a lawsuit in his future unless Joel really wants to be even more of a dick than the Marvin Gaye estate, but This track kind of felt like a watered down and less dynamic version of Brazil on the first couple of listens, but I did come around on it after a while though. While the chord progression is still a bit on the simplistic side, I do think Shypho was putting most of his effort into the overall atmosphere of this thing and making it evolve more and be more immersive, and he did succeed on that front. I mean, I consider it one of my huge favorites from here, and I wish I could, but it's not exactly trailing way behind everything else here either. It's still a very solid track. And finally, we close with an ambient version of his earlier track, Lights, which did feel ever so slightly tacked on, but whatever. Lights is originally from his debut EP, Regenerate, and the production on that EP is a noticeable step down from all his later stuff. Because of course it is, I mean, it's his first. This ambient version is in fact more enjoyable and better produced than the original. It works in maybe a Tangerine Dream kind of way, or maybe like the outro of the Coma Duster track, Solace. But something about that lead synth tone kind of felt like it was returning to the more amateurish feel of that first EP. Felt a tad underwhelming, and it was just a step away from being the kind of stripped back modular sound that he was probably going for. I don't know, still works well as an ending all the same. So that's Proof of Concept. Obviously I do have my problems with this thing, most of which I've already mentioned, and the stuff I've already mentioned mainly comes down to nitpicks. But maybe the most obvious thing is just the fact that Shypho isn't exactly delivering super original or groundbreaking material that I can associate just with him. He's trying to fit into a bunch of genre labels and fit with a certain kind of crowd, and he does have a generally more subtle and more watery approach to this stuff that I guess can set him apart from other artists in this mold. That's all well and good, but there's not really anything on this album that I haven't heard before either. If you do listen to a lot of ambient techno, if you're a big fan of Deadmau5 and the Mousetrap label, or maybe you enjoy some occasional Richie Houghton, you're not going to find anything mind-blowing here. But, lack of originality aside, I will definitely say that I enjoyed this whole thing. For what it is, it's really well produced, takes charge of its atmosphere consistently very well, fits together super seamlessly in its continuous mix. That's a Bandcamp exclusive thing, I recommend checking that out. It has enough variety to keep me interested and allow each of the tracks to maintain their own identity. It's just a very solid, if standard, ambient techno release, so yeah. I'd say it's certainly worth a shot, and I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters. They're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list or make me review something, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.